It's exactly it. Be my own boss. That's what I wanted. I wanted to basically be able to control my own opportunities. I wanted to succeed or fail on my own. I didn't want to have other people telling me, and ultimately the agendas of other people kind of inserted into what I was doing. And so for me, it was always it started by having fun. I wanted to enjoy myself. I wanted to do more in my life than just the daily 9-to-5 grind. But I think ultimately it came down to the freedom that you were talking about, right? Like I have a little bit more, there's the fear. I think I heard that on the podcast too, where you were saying that like it's 10 times harder as an entrepreneur. But if you push yourself, if you motivate yourself, if you strengthen yourself, if you do those type of things, then you can really get to a great place. And then the success is you've accomplished it, but not for the sake of ego, right? But for the sake of drive.
This podcast is brought to you by ISU Corp. Are you having trouble with your software projects? Is there a project that's taking too long or a technology you can't handle? We can help. We are ISU Corp, experts in custom software since 2005. With almost 20 years of experience, we can solve any technical problem from new businesses to satellite software. We've done it all. Let us turn your ideas into reality. Learn more about how we can help by visiting us at www.isucorp.ca. Your solution starts here.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Break Free Podcast. I am your host, David Mansella. Today we have with us David from Phoenix, Arizona. Brother, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much, David. Glad to be here.
I usually ask for all my guests, I ask to introduce themselves as, I think it's a more humble way of starting the podcast and the interview. I mean, I could have a list of things that you have accomplished before, but I think it's better to get it from you. So tell me, David, we already know where you live. And now tell me, what do you do for a living? And what is your full name?
My name is David. I go by David W. Litwin. That's my author name. I do live in Phoenix, Arizona. I have basically been a graphic designer for 33 years. Fell in love with it. I actually wanted to be a fashion buyer for Nordstrom, actually. And as I was sitting there at 19 years old and I was drawing, coming back from one of my fashion classes, I said, I could do what I like to do, or I could do what I love to do. And I decided to jump into what I love to do. So at that point, I shifted my entire model and went into graphic design. And this is my third agency. This is my most successful agency. Loved every single day of every single moment of work. Never had a day that I woke up and went, oh, I got to design today. So it's been a lot of fun. So I've done a lot of other things in my life. I think you kind of talked about that a little bit, but I've written books. I've produced, my daughter has a game that I've tried to produce for her. I have a fitness product out on the market. I had a fashion line I tried to create. So I wake up at 4:00 in the morning to tackle whatever I possibly can for that day.
Wow. So you're an early riser.
I'm an early riser, but I'm an early goer to bedder too. I go to bed at about 8:30. So
when you talk about graphic design, nowadays people think about Photoshop or other digital media. But if you said that you have been a graphic designer for over 30 years, I know what you mean. So can you explain to people, how did you get into graphic design and what did that mean 30 years ago?
So 30 years ago, you had to be an artist. And I was not a very good artist. But you had to be an artist to really ultimately become a graphic designer, because everything was done in paste up. Everything was done. There were very few fonts. I mean, there were like 10 fonts you could use at the time. So everything had to be drawn or everything had to be created. And so I just basically started right from the beginning, and I got in right after typesetting. If anybody knows what that is, that's where this very exacting process of figuring out how many letters could fit on a line of text. And thankfully, I didn't have to deal with that, but I did everything else. So it was not easy back in the day. So I look at it from the standpoint of a lot of people who, I wouldn't say they don't have respect for it, but they don't recognize what we've come from. And so I'm very, very humble. I think from that perspective, there's a lot of humility in understanding that this is not an easy process from when I started. And then also a recognition for the people that are getting started now that they've got it easy, but at the same time, it still helps them get to a better place by just encouraging them and paving the way, I guess. So I like the idea of, there's a lot of people in our lives that have built the roads that we get to drive really fast on. And
it's incredible, David, because when I was in my second time in college on computer science, I decided to take a little side courses on graphic design, and so I took some courses there, and I was fascinated by it. Back then we were using CorelDRAW to do everything.
Yeah.
The first versions, because I'm talking 1994, right? 1995.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with the whole thing. In fact, when I graduated college, one of the things that I decided to do was do graphic design for web pages. But little did I know that I was too early in the market, because I graduated in 1995 and nobody knew what the internet was yet, and everything was done by text.
Right.
So it's incredible how everything evolves, right?
Absolutely. I've been through, I call it 3 epochal shifts in the graphic design world. So the first one was desktop publishing, the second one was website design, and then the third one is fairly recent, which is really kind of the quicker and easier platforms like Canva and stuff like that. And each time I've been able to kind of surf the wave. But AI, you didn't talk about that yet, but AI is really kind of the tsunami, right? Yeah. That's the one that everybody's going to have trouble with. And so for me, I'm like not only trying to surf the wave, I'm building surfboards. So I've created articles on Medium, I've created my own Udemy course, and I'm teaching people how to surf the wave of AI and getting paid for it. So my goal this year is to make 1/4 of my income through passive income opportunities. So basically making money while I sleep. So that's my whole goal, is to figure out, I want to make money and not have to do something. Even though I love what I do, I want to figure out a way to make money and just relaxing and resting and resting on what I've been able to accomplish in my life. So that's kind of my goal. I don't know if I'm going to get there. That's pretty hefty for 1/4 of my revenue, but we'll try.
Well, I think it's possible for sure, David, and I'm so happy that you brought that out, because being financially free is when your passive income matches your basic expenses, your cost of living. And that was my whole goal, my whole life. When I realized that I was a slave to a job, number one, I thought, okay, I need to create my own business if I want to run my own time. So it wasn't the money part that allowed me to run my first business. In my mind was, I didn't want to commute anymore. And I wanted to control my calendar. Yeah. Because I noticed that when I was in a corporate environment, half of the time was wasted in meaningless meetings. Right? So if you look at my life now, especially with the companies that I run, they have a prohibition of having meetings just for the sake of meeting. They have to have a meaningful meeting. And also the commuting part, right? Like I commuted for 10 years, about 3 hours a day. And it was not only killing my time, but also preventing me from growing with my family.
Yeah.
But once I became an entrepreneur, I realized how important it was to create a passive income stream, because after I was able to get a hold of my time, I also realized that being an entrepreneur was 10 times worse than being an employee, because now instead of having one boss, you had 20, 30 bosses, whatever number of clients you had.
Right.
And the demand was even harder. And, the resources were limited. So that's when I thought, okay, there's got to be a way to create passive income. And one of the reasons why I have this podcast is because I have the blessing of the passive income that I created in the past. To the point that, in 2014, I actually became financially independent. My passive income matched my basic expenses. So instead of growing my basic expenses to have, more and more, I decided that this was the standard of living that I was willing to take on, and whatever else I got above, I was willing to lose.
Yeah.
And God, I have never had to lose anything. Like, in fact, my living standards keep growing, but I know that I could go back to my basic income if I need to.
Yeah, that's great. I actually paid my house payment last month off passive income, first month of it. So
Beautiful.
yes, 300 students in my Udemy course. So yeah.
Beautiful. Congratulations, David. And this is
you.
why I love this podcast, because of people like you, that they are shining the light. It is possible, David, and you will get it done. If you really want it, you will get it done. With me, I use the blessing of real estate. That might not be the case anymore for people that are starting up. When I was building up my portfolio, I built a passive income company all around real estate. And I was blessed because I was before the real estate wave. So I started in 2007, but it was my own house. So even though the house depreciated, I had no problem, right?
Yeah.
And then I started buying property for rentals when the market was depressed. But I never bought houses to flip them. I bought houses very conservative to renovate them and rent them out. And that's how I was able to, in 2014, basically retire from anything that will cause me a financial burden.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I was in a business course a long time ago, and they talked about we're always going to have breakdowns. But the question is the breakdown in an area you want to have a breakdown? We're always going to have, is it the 1972 Honda that's breaking down, or is it the XJ7 Jaguar? And for some people, they need that XJ7 Jaguar, and some people are happy in the Honda, and they have $2 million in the bank. So, it really boils down to, it is that happiness aspect of things, right? It's not what you have. And so for me, I realized that even if I, from the standpoint of even making passive income, there's not a lot I need. I always grew up and I had that image of the Lamborghini. I bought Rob Report magazine and I had that Lamborghini up on the, on the wall. And it's I'm going to have that. I'm going to have that. And as I got later in my life, I'm like, I really don't want that. I really don't need it. You know what I mean? And so, I want my wife to be happy. I want to have security for my kids and my family and, have the house paid off. And what else do you need? Get a jet ski if you want it. But if you're just get a jet ski to get a jet ski, it's not worth anything. I
remember, I was brought up in the 80s, and the way my dad used to motivate me to go to university was, showing me last time he showed me a poster. Remember this poster that had a Mercedes-Benz Ferrari?
I knew exactly what you're going to say.
It says, the reward of higher education, and it had this beautiful mansion. Well, I kept looking at that picture all the time,
Yep. I had a friend that had that in his room. I know exactly. It's six car garage with all the cars in it. Reward of higher education. I remember it.
And I tell you, I fell into that trap once I actually was able to. Once I was able to set myself financially free, I went into a beautiful 5-year turn of just having fun with my wife and kids and traveling the world while growing my main business still, but delegating a lot of it. But then after I came back, when I got bored, getting bored is very dangerous, because once I got bored, I started to grow again. And when I started to grow again, I started mingling with people that had all those things. And that I could actually afford, but I never cared to have them. But then I started craving them. And what I can tell you from the whole story is that it doesn't matter how much material stuff or how much luxury you get, it will never be enough.
Yeah.
I remember I got into watches, and it's it got so stupid. When you start researching, my dream was having this $25,000 Rolex, and then I started researching more, and you could get watches for $125,000, $500,000. It's stupid.
Right.
And the only people that know about the watch is the people that own them. And I don't know, man, it got so stupid.
Right.
That I have to, I have come to realize, number one, I stopped. So I was, I am a man of faith, and I'm a born again Christian. I believe you are too, right, David?
Yes, sir.
And I stopped reading my Bible. And when I got into this business fast lane, I got enticed by the world, and those 5 years were beautiful. After I got free from having to work, but then the 7 years after they were terrible. I mean, I was multiplying my income, and I was multiplying my net worth exponentially, and it didn't matter how much more money I got. The more money I got, the more depressed I got. It's because, and it wasn't because of the money. It was because of the desire to achieve more, to show it off to the people, to show
Right.
the people that I could do it.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, there's always going to be somebody better than you. Always.
Yeah. Yeah.
You will never be the best. And the thing is that when you're trying to show off, when you're trying to show the world that you could do it by yourself,
Yeah.
that's the highest expression of ego. And what that creates is a huge burden in your soul, and there is nothing that will satisfy it. And so you get the next toy. I was even thinking about buying a jet. Like I was really like, my wife will actually start crying because I was obsessed of getting a private plane. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's so stupid. I mean, nothing wrong with getting, a tool for work if you really need it, because you're
Right.
going to be deliver your blessings to more people with that mode of transportation. But if you're just buying a plane just to show off, to show the world that you can actually have a private plane, what a stupidity, man.
Yeah.
That's how bad I got.
Yeah. Well, it ties into neuroscience, and not to get too scientific on it, but basically, the reality is when we want something, and this is probably what happened to you when you first started with the watch. When you want something, your brain builds up this excitement in the inside, in the neurochemicals and in the synaptic buildup. And then when you get it, all of that goes away. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, now that you have what it was you wanted, and you're like, what's next? And so you just keep going to bigger and bigger things because your mind just wants something new and new and new and new and new. And so you have to kind of break that cycle where it's like, what's enough? Where can we be where we're happy with what we have?
And you know what? This is the key. And the funny part is that now that I went back to my faith, the Lord rescued me from hell. I no longer care about all those things.
Yeah.
Now the money is just growing by itself, more and more and more. And the more it grows, the more I deploy that money for the kingdom, right? So for the audience, what I mean by that is I am trying to give back as much as I can. And the more I give back, the more I get. Yeah. And then I just happen to realize that it's a spiritual law that is well written in the Bible. The Bible says, you will reap whatever it is that you sow, right? And it's it's not only with money, it's with everything. I can see it in this podcast, right? Like, but ego creeps in, brother. Ego creeps in, like I had this idea of, this just happened recently, I had this idea of creating a promotional package to promote the YouTube part of the podcast for all my guests, thinking, okay, if they give me a little bit of money, I can push it even further. So I created these packages, and I started researching, my team started researching how to promote YouTube advertising and all that. And then I got an email, a nasty email on Friday, and this guy said, David, I know you and you're a good person, and what are you doing offering packages for money to people? They're giving you your time already. Mm-hmm. And it just, I froze. I froze of shame. Mm. And then I just I just kneeled down and said, Lord, please forgive me. I got proud again. I got proud again. The intention wasn't bad.
No.
But I have been giving everything that I can ever want and need. I mean, like, everything is there. So why would I actually ask people for money to promote their podcast when it's my privilege to actually bless the world with it? And I have the money to promote it myself.
Right. That's what I saw too. You remember when we talked, and I was like, okay, is this going to be something where this is a paid deal? Because everybody kind of comes in with this sweet talking, and then all of a sudden you find out it's $1,000 or it's $10,000 or it's whatever.
Yeah.
And so when you said, no, I do this to bless people. And ultimately, it is from the standpoint of like, you're getting blessed because you're getting that insight and that wisdom from other people that you're like, oh my, I didn't never think of that, or I didn't ever know that, or, that's something that I can use in my own life. And so ultimately, I kind of call it, whether you love her or hate her, the Oprah effect, where she's been able to have all these people on her shows. And in doing so, she's learned from all these people, and it's just caused her to grow as well. But for you, from that spiritual standpoint, you're doing it even more because you're sowing it back into the kingdom. And so therefore, it's like, and how do we do that? We do that by just encouraging other people. We do it by pouring ourselves out and not giving it to ourselves. And the more you do that, the more that person grows, the more that opportunity allows something new, and that's something to be fresh. And, and then they, for me, it's the greatest thing that I've ever heard is someone say, you changed my life. because I was cool, I was cool, and I had a Range Rover, and I could go anywhere I wanted when I was younger, but I didn't want to be cool anymore. I wanted, there's nothing to that. It's hollow, and so when you can have somebody say, man, you said something 6 months ago, or sometimes it's like, hey, somebody said something to me 6 months ago, and I'm like, I was the one who said that, but you don't say it, you're just like, well, that's cool. I'm so glad that you got something out of that. And I want to have that in my life where people are able to say things to me, and I'm like, I learned from that moment. I heard them,
So it's a process of sanctification for sure. I thought once I thought I was graduated from all the stupidity, I just come to realize that the funny part is that when I had the idea, I said, okay, this is going to be it has to be free. Like, I've done over 180 episodes. So I said, everybody has come and everybody's getting blessed. So why don't we just, for the people that were already published, like 2-3 months that were already in the air, let's push it more, but grab money from them to push it more. So that was the idea. And 2 months ago, I told my team, guys, stop doing that. I don't think that's good, because nobody got into it. So I'm like, that led me to believe maybe that wasn't, the Lord's will. But one of my team members didn't remember, so she kept sending the emails asking for the money. I mean, it was just an ask, just in case they wanted to promote it. Yeah. And then I got this nasty email on Friday, and I just, oh my God, it was like, geez, I messed it up again.
What did your wife say?
Pardon?
What did your wife say?
That's another thing. I never consulted with my wife. And that's a great point, because I believe the Lord puts people together to complement each other. My wife is always the discerner, right? Like, I am the entrepreneur and I have an idea and I deploy, right? Yeah. I'm used to that, but I need to slow down, and things like this matter, especially with something that is on unconditional giving, like this podcast. I should have gone to her and said, listen, I have this idea. What do you think about it? And I never did that. I never did that. She would have told me, why would you do that?
Right. But you learned. But somebody came in like who would that be? Like the situation with David, right? And that the priest that came in and said, hey, this is what's going on. And he learned from that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was the prophet Nathan, right?
Yeah.
But that was too late, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy, but too late, but at the same time, David repented, right? And he was forgiven.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. So anyways, creating passive income is the best thing you can ever do. And I think it's one of the things that you need to achieve. However, we need to learn never to rely on the passive income. Yeah. Because as the money comes in, it will actually get dry. And also, I have come to realize that there is not a thing. There is not such a thing as passive income. You still need to have attention on whatever is making you money, because if you don't, it erodes away until the point that it collapses, right?
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think you are never, when you're not doing it yourself, you're beholden to somebody else. And so therefore, there's always going to be a situation where the algorithm could change, or the company could go under, or whatever. So you can't ever go, ooh, I'm set. You can't do that. You have to have some sort of thing you're falling back on. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, even the standpoint of like a songwriter, who's making a lot of money in selling songs, and then all of a sudden either something happens with the artist, or something happens with the studio or the record company, and all of a sudden now they're out, and what do? So I think having those support channels, I think, are always important.
For sure.
Yeah.
So tell me, David, why do you think you're getting so much successful in this third agency that you're running? Like, what's the difference between this and the beginning of your career?
That's a great question. I realized that it's not about design. It is no longer about what I do. And for years, I thought it was about what I did. It is about making sure that the client is 100% satisfied in every aspect of what I do. And it's what I call building an experience genre. So what I've done in my own business is I've realized that if it's not about my products and services, then it's got to be about the experience. So I have positioned everything in my life. I call myself an inspirer, right? My motto is live inspired. So I've positioned everything in my life to inspire my clients every single moment of every single interaction. So it's an over amplification of my personality, if you will, but it's an authentic overapplication of my personality. I had somebody who read an article and he said, man, it sounds like you're doing that just for the sake of like gaining business. I said, no, I'm doing it for the sake of improving the lives of my clients. Gaining business is the after effect of what I'm doing. So I think that that's probably what's been and then getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and working on projects from 4 to, 4, it's kind of a strategy, because it's like, if you get up at 8 or you start working at 8 or 9, by the time during the winter, by the time you get done, it's nighttime. So you're exhausted, right? You're looking outside, it's dark outside, and you're like, oh, I've just, I got to quit. But when you start at 4 and you get to 4, it's still light outside. So you're kind of like, I can keep going a little bit longer, So that's how I kind of see it. So yeah.
That strategy is pretty good. Actually, I've heard a lot of people in this podcast that they are actually early risers for sure. Yeah. And it also helps with the family, because then you know that you're going to have enough time for your family in the evening, right? Right. Yeah, I'm done at 5:30. Pretty much every single day. I have been for the last 2 years. I've never had a day where I've had to work till 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night. And when I was growing up, I was always the grind. I have a friend of mine that calls it that, the grind, right? I was always grinding. I was working till 2 o'clock in the morning. I was angry because I was working so much. I had an office, and I was pretty hot tempered when I was like 18, 19 years old. And all of the office chairs in my office, they had the little plastic, the little things come out at the bottom of your chair. There are 5 little notches, and there's a little plastic that sort of protects from the side. Well, all those were broken off because I would like get upset during the day if something hadn't gone right and knocked a little piece of this thing off. And, so you could tell which was my chair, because it had lots of these pieces coming off, because I would just get so frustrated during the day and just realize that was such a shallow way to live and such a stupid way to think. So I got to the point where it's like, yeah, I think I heard this in one of the podcasts where someone was talking about how I'm trying to remember exactly how they said it. Something to the effect of they were working super hard, and then they realized that it was like, who was it? I can't remember which one it was. I apologize, but I think it was the lady you had on that had the substance abuse issue. But she had talked about that, where it was like she got to the point where she was working so hard, and she caused that burnout, and then she put herself back into that better position and realized through her relationship with her mom and through what had happened that she could put herself back to a better place. So I think it's absolutely key. It's not worth it. It's not worth the $400,000, $500,000 when you can make $200,000 or $150,000 or $100,000 and be happy, right? And I think that's what I've noticed, is that like watching movies like watching TV shows like Billions or shows like Power, everybody wants power, everybody wants control, and then they have it and they're miserable. Yeah,
they're completely sad. I mean, it's just so sad to watch. You're watching these shows going, you're a jerk. You're a jerk. Why are we watching you? So it's not worth it. It's just not worth it.
We'll go back to the ego lie, right? It's just the ego lie. Right now I'm working remotely. Usually in the winters I come down to my homeland. I was born in Guatemala. Yeah. And this time, we just rented it's a 700 square feet apartment. Yeah. In the city center, and it's been wonderful. And right. I can probably have 10 of these things in my house, and I don't feel the difference. Honestly, I don't feel the difference. Yeah. But obviously, when I go back to home, I'm gonna feel blessed when I see that beautiful space, especially our secret place, our prayer room is beautiful. Yeah. But it's really, none of that is necessary. And if you're going to sacrifice your family or your health to achieve something that is going to get normal, everything gets normal anyway. Everything gets normal anyway. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying not to reach success. What I'm saying is put life in perspective and realize that material possessions will never ever fill you up. Yeah. It's gonna make you happy for a little bit, and then you get used to it, right? Right. Absolutely. One of the books that really helped me, right now I'm just reading the Bible left, right, and center, and the book of Proverbs. Wow. If anybody wants to really get through wisdom in life, just read the book of Proverbs. Yeah. In fact, there is 30 chapters in that book, and you can read one chapter a day. I did it for 5 years, every single day.
And I did it just to see if I could like learn a little scripture. You know, I wanted to memorize a verse. So I figured, well, if I did it, you know, February, March, April, May, by the time I got to maybe June, I'd know a couple verses. And then I'd be meeting with somebody and I'd be like talking to them and they'd ask me a question. I'd be like, oh, that kind of reminds me of Proverbs 3:5, you know, or that reminds me of Proverbs 16:12, you know, in his heart a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. I think it's 16:8. And then I got to the point where I kept reading and then I started combining verses. I said, well, that kind of reminds me of trust the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your understanding, but also over here where it says, you know, he will direct your paths and the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He directs it like a water course wherever he pleases. And then they go, wow, that's kind of cool. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, that was interesting. And then by month 15, I just started saying stuff I didn't even know where it was coming from. And my friends were like going, you know, what is going on? And I was reading Proverbs every day and I would skip, after I got through about month 6, I would skip the first chapter of Proverbs. And I said, yeah, oh, okay, I know that. You know, the first 7 verses, you'll understand the sayings and the riddles of the wise and the parables and the strategies and stuff like that. And I was like, I kind of got that. And so I went back into it one day. I really felt called to read it. And I started reading and I was like, these are promises. Like, this is literally telling me that if I do this, this is what's going to happen.
Yep.
And I was like, not just from applying it, but just from the reading the book. So after that, I told every friend of mine, I'm like, you got to read Proverbs.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The one thing that the Lord showed me after I got rescued from hell, I wish I had the time to give you and everything that happened, but just let's say that I got super lost, and then back in July 2022, the Lord rescued me from hell and he restored my marriage, my businesses, my family, everything has been restored now. And now, and the Lord is, you know, is bringing back sevenfold. It's incredible. But one of the first thing that I read, that the Lord guided me in a supernatural way to read, is the book of Ecclesiastes. Mm-hmm. And another book full of wisdom. And I remember chapter 12. It's beautiful because basically the entire book says that life is meaningless.
Yeah.
If you don't find the Lord in your life, if you don't find your Savior, your Lord and Savior, and if you don't know where you're going after this life, everything is meaningless. And chapter 12 is the last chapter of that book. And I highly suggest you read it, or anybody that is running businesses or trying to achieve material wealth. Again, I'm not saying don't go for the material wealth, but go for it for the right reasons, knowing that everything stays here. Everything stays here. You come to the world naked and you live naked.
Yeah.
And the time span in this world is so short.
Yeah.
Compared to your eternity, to the real you, to your spirit, to your soul. The time on earth is so short that it's not worth it, man.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, the Lord is multiplying my wealth because he wants to use it for the kingdom, not for me, because what else do I need?
Yeah.
Right?
You're giving him the director role.
Yeah, man. Like, just surrender everything. And once you surrender, you know, look at me now. It's like, you know, it's so hard. For me, my problem is that, you know, I have 221 people that wants to get interviewed to see if they go into the podcast.
Yeah.
And now I don't know what to do. Like, how do I actually prioritize, right? So now I'm asking for wisdom. How do I actually filter through? Because I only have so many meetings in the week. You know?
Yeah.
But that's a beautiful problem.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's the problem, like we said, the problem in the area you want to have a problem with.
Yeah. So that book changed my life too. You know, chapter 12 says that, you know, the body comes back to the earth because the body is made out of the earth, and the spirit returns to the Lord who gave it. So the battle is for your soul. And that's what we need to worry, and we need to focus on what's going to happen to your soul after you go through this world. You know, Alexander the Great, he was one of the biggest empires in the history of the world. So at that time, it was like even bigger than the United States. So the known world at that time, Alexander the Great conquered the world. And he did it in 10 years. Which is a record. Like, there hasn't been another power, like world power, that was able to conquer the world so fast. In 10 years, he got the modern world conquered. And then he died at 33, he had a fever and he died. And when he was dying, he told the people that was going to bury him with his hands open, looking up, to show the world that as you come empty, you leave empty. And he was the richest man alive during his era.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow. Yeah.
That's a good lesson.
That is a good lesson. That's a very good lesson. Absolutely.
So David, tell me, why being an entrepreneur? Why not having a job like everybody else? What motivated you to be your own boss?
It's exactly it. Be my own boss. That's what I wanted. I wanted to basically be able to control my own opportunities. I wanted to succeed or fail on my own. I didn't want to have other people telling me, and ultimately the agendas of other people kind of inserted into what I was doing. And so for me, it was always it started by having fun. You know, I wanted to enjoy myself. I wanted to do more in my life than just the daily 9-to-5 grind. But I think ultimately it came down to the freedom that you were talking about, right? Like I have a little bit more, there's the fear. I think I heard that on the podcast too, where you were saying that like it's 10 times harder as an entrepreneur. But if you push yourself, if you motivate yourself, if you strengthen yourself, if you do those type of things, then you can really get to a great place. And then the success is you've accomplished it, but not for the sake of ego, right? But for the sake of drive. And I think that's the key. Like ego always wants you to sacrifice something positive in your life. Drive always wants you to sacrifice something negative. And so, recognizing that, and it's like, what's my motivation? Like, what am I losing here to gain this? And I think that that's kind of the key for me. I've just seen that for pretty much my whole life. So I love it. I mean, I get to listen to loud music. I put my feet up on the desk. I get to interact with my clients. And like you said, they become my bosses, but I treat them with dignity and respect.
Yeah.
And they become friends. And that's the key.
And one thing that I have come to realize is that once you become successful in business, yes, your clients are your bosses, but you also have the right to fire your clients. You cannot do that when you have a job.
Right.
Unless you switch jobs.
Absolutely. And I've done that before. I've told people that, like, look, I'm not Kinko's.
Right.
So, if you're looking for someone who's a yes man, I'm not your person.
Right.
So, yeah.
David,
but that's because I want them to grow. I want them to be successful. It's only going to be beneficial to me if they're a massive success.
The one thing that I realized in entrepreneurship is that it's so important to say no as important to say yes.
Yeah.
Because you need to look for the ideal client. You're not just any client. Now, having said that, though, at the beginning, when you're just starting up, you have to do whatever it takes to get the client, because at the beginning you have no reputation, nobody knows you, and even if the client abuses you, as long as the client gets satisfied at the beginning and the abuse is not so much that it will bankrupt you, I encourage people to go and do it, because you will learn from that. But at some point, you're going to gain enough reputation where you can actually filter out the people that you want to work with, so that the people that you want to work with matches your values, and then you grow beautiful, because everybody wins.
Yeah,
right?
Totally agree. 100%.
Did you experience that too at the beginning?
Absolutely. Yeah, I had to take everything. And so you're frustrated, right? You're working with people you don't necessarily want to work with. You're not, it wasn't that I took people on that I didn't have value to, or I didn't operate according to their values. It was just, it wasn't the type of work I wanted to do, or it was too stressful, or, the Tim Ferris model, where basically 80% of the work was being done by 20% of the clients.
Yeah.
And, you fire your worst 10% every year, because then by the time you get down to year 5, you've got the exact, you're working with the exact people you want to work with. I don't think I have one client in the last 5 years that I haven't enjoyed working with.
Yeah.
And hopefully they've enjoyed working with me.
Of course they have, because it's mutual. If the client is not happy, you're not going to be happy, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I didn't know that lesson, so I let myself get abused for at least 5 years. The first 5 years, it was horrible. But by the end of the third year, I could actually choose my clients, but I didn't know. Because, again, back to the Bible. You know what the Bible says? My people dies because of the ignorance they have, the lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
The Bible doesn't say that we die because we don't pray. No, it says that we die because we don't have knowledge. Right? Isn't that profound? So I didn't know. And, I remember the last client that I let abuse my team and myself. We ended up working 6 months for free because they kept increasing the requirements, and it was a fixed term contract. And we worked 6 months for free. It was almost $500,000 out of my pocket to finish the project. But once we finished it, he was super happy. He gave us referrals, and I swore to myself I will never let anybody else do that.
Yeah.
So now we have this rigorous process of letting the people in, only the people that are right, and we never do fixed cost anymore.
Yeah.
So you put things, we have a hybrid model where our clients, I'm talking about from my main business, software consulting business. We have a hybrid model where we actually can deliver 60-70% of the work on a fixed cost basis because we have so much experience, but there's always a 30% wiggle room where they can actually change the requirements if they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah,
right?
I love it. Yeah.
What's in the future for you, David? Let's say you achieve your passive income. Let's say you achieve your passive income, not 1/4, but your entire income is passive. What would you do with your life?
Great question. I want to write a little bit more. So I love, to be honest with you, I'm doing what I want to do. There's not a lot of other things that I want to do. I want to be able to talk to people. I want to be able to have the light go on in their eyes and then go, wow, I've never seen the world that way. I've never experienced things in this particular way. And I think that to me is the great thing that I think I bring to people's lives, is to be able to get them to go, I've seen what you're saying, but it's never been presented to me in a way that makes sense like that. It's never resonated. And then I hope people do the same thing for me, right? Where I'm like, in fact, actually a couple of weeks ago, somebody said something to me and I was like, okay, I'm going to learn from that moment. I'm going to take that, and it's going to be, everything needs to be a learning experience, a learning process, even the bad things, even the things that are difficult, or the things that we get angry, something that we could get angry at. Never get angry at anything. I realize that anger is an emotion that doesn't exist until it actually comes out of us.
Yeah.
We can be upset, right? And somebody can say something to me that I'm hurt by or I'm upset by. But if I process it and let it go and just never let it come out, never let it express, then I'm fine. And I think we've moved into a culture where basically from the moment something happens to the moment of anger is like instantaneous. Oh you didn't get my change right at Burger King, so I'm going to jump over the counter and attack you.
Yeah.
And it's
so for me, it's kind of the same way, just the wording, right? So the syntax for me is different. For me, it's, you have the right to get angry, but you don't have the right to have wrath, right? So when people become like so angry that they start attacking, right? Or for example, road rage. It's funny because, I was at church yesterday and the pastor was talking about forgiving others and forgiving yourself, and ask for forgiveness. But, the Bible says that the only requirement for the Lord to forgive your sins is if you forgive the people that sin against you.
Yeah. And,
and that's the true secret of having a beautiful life. Because if you hold a grudge, if you have remorse and you have this thing in your life, a lot of the diseases that we get is from not forgiving other people.
Yeah.
Regardless how bad it is. And it's funny, but because we were having this lesson, and then as soon as I left the church, I was asking for somebody to let me in, and they let me in. When they let me in, I said thank you, right? I said a sign of thank you, and the person flipped the finger at me. And I'm like, I wasn't expecting that reaction. I'm like, okay, I had a choice. Do I get angry and reply back? Or do I apply what I just learned? And I said, I forgive you, brother. Maybe you're having a horrible day. And I prayed for him and said, Lord, please, I forgive him, but please help him because maybe he's having a hard day. Or maybe I was too intrusive when I got in front of the line, even though I was asking to get in. You see what I mean? So it was an instant of, I got angry. It was an instant of anger. But like you said, I didn't let it, the way it went out is after processing it. And I say, okay, I forgive you, brother. I forgive you for sure. I don't know what's going on in your life, and I bless you, and thank you for letting me in. And that was it. But it could have ruined my whole day. Some people actually will stop the car, knock on their door, and start fighting them.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's when it becomes rage, right?
That's right. That's a great way to say it. Anger versus wrath. I love that.
David, thank you so much for your time. Can you believe it's been over 40 minutes already?
No, not at all.
Time flies when we're talking wisdom. David, one last question, and if you've been listening to my podcast, you're probably ready, which I don't like, but you know what question I'm going to ask. If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
Live inspired.
Live inspired?
Live inspired, because what inspired means is spirit-led, right? And I think that that's the key. It's everything you were talking about. It's just being able to basically live in such a way that like you are, it's kingdom, right? That's all it is. It's just live kingdom. I think that's probably a better way to say it.
Yeah. So, I didn't know that inspired meant led by the Holy Spirit. That's amazing.
It was originally in the 1828 dictionary. Webster said it.
Live inspired. Makes sense. I love that. Live inspired. If people live that way, we will have a much more better world.
We would.
Right.
Because we live for ourselves, right? And I think that that's the tragedy of it is that you talked about it. It all gets normalized. Mm-hmm. So why live for yourself?
You know, there is two ways of living.
Yeah.
The way of the spirit and the way of the flesh.
Yeah.
And if you read the Apostle Paul, he's clear about it, right? What are the way of the spirit? You know, helping others, doing good things, thinking about good things, thinking about loving your neighbor the way you love yourself. What's the things of the flesh? Living about myself, all about me. How do I fulfill the desires of my flesh? How do I get the next big thing in my life? How do I show off people that I'm successful and they're not? How do I oppress somebody else so I can get more? That's the two ways. So living inspired is the way. Thank you so much, David. God bless you, brother. If people like to get in touch with you, hire your services from your agency, where can they find you?
www.purefusionmedia.com.
Purefusionmedia.com.
Yes, sir.
Are you also on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn under David W. Litwin. And then if anybody really wants to find me for my writings, it's on Medium. So everything's David W. Litwin. So you can even Google me. I've got a Google page.
Beautiful. David, brother, thank you so much. God bless you. God bless your family. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of the week.
Thank you, David.
Cheers.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.